and welcome to the Ignite CDA May board meeting. If everybody will still please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. It is quiet. All right, first thing on the agenda, any public comment? Seeing none, we have a motion for a consent calendar.
I'll move that we approve the consent calendar consisting of board meeting minutes for April 17th, 2024, approval of payables as submitted, and approval of the district monthly financial statements.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to the executive director's report. Tony?
Thank you, Chairman Metz. First item is involves the Atlas project, the monument entry signage issue. I shared with you a background memo regarding this initiative and giving the board, painting the picture for the board for the different options that you have. And I've invited Phil Boyd to kind of run through that memo with you and kind of give you some illustrations as to what the entry monuments are looking like these days, since it's been quite a while since we last talked about this. So. Phil, thanks.
Thank you, Tony, Chairperson Metz, and board members. This has been a while, and so we're going to go back in time just a little bit to refresh the board's memory and then get you current where we're at and down to the decision point. So the board might remember originally we had looked at 3 different monument location signs. The board ultimately decided to move forward with the monument at Atlas and the monument at Suzanne Drive, not the monument at Heartwood. Some for budgetary reasons, but also because we weren't certain what was happening in the Phase 3 area. And so there was, the uncertainty was like, well, where should the sign go? And, you know, is this going to be commercial? Is it going to be residential? So the board just said, let's just not plan to bid that one at this time. These are just some of the illustrations I showed back at the time. This is an image at Atlas Road to give you an idea of what the monument sign, the location. We're at the roundabout here, obviously. This is at Suzanne, kind of another snapshot of what the monument will look like there. And then this is the monument, a smaller version at what was potentially intended for Heartwood, and it was the one the board decided not to move forward with. Actually, at that time, we had prepared construction documents for each one of those, and when we originally priced it with La Riviere, they went and priced priced 2 of them, and we're looking at pricing this 3rd one, but we ended up, having it off to the side, but they were part of the original construction documents. The big challenge that we ran into, which caused this giant delay in time, was at Atlas, we had intended for the monument sign to be in the city right-of-way through an encroachment permit. As we worked through that with the city, they said, gosh, we would really prefer that you not put it in the right-of-way. So this is kind of a blow up that area. Here's the Celtice roundabout, Atlas Road. We had the sign originally out here, and they said, gosh, could you not put it in the right-of-way and put it somewhere but other than the right-of-way? Well, at that point, Ignite had sold this property to Chase Mixis, and we went through the initial discussions with them is, hey, would you be willing to give us an easement? And they were like, sure. And like 9 months later, a year later, and primarily through Danielle's good efforts, we finally got an easement from them. But it was just laborious working through the process. We also ended up having to redesign the sign because now it has a retaining wall as part of it, and so that drug on. We're finally at the point, though, that we have permits for the sign. We're ready to move forward. In that time span, La Riviere had to go back and reprice it because obviously the market had changed. I'm pretty surprised how the pricing hasn't gone radically different, and I'll show you that here in a second. This is the sign at Suzanne, another plan view. So Phase 3 or Mount Hink is up here. This is the Prairie Trail. The sign location is right there, and that's what that sign would look like. And these are lit, which I'll talk about here in a second as well. And then this is the 3rd sign location that isn't currently part of the plan. And here's Heartwood. Here's the summary of kind of sign options. They were in your memo. The first one is, hey, let's just stay the original course. We just want to do 2 signs at those 2 locations. There has been a slight budget increase since it was originally proposed, $23,000. 5 of that is just the Avista hookups, because at the time, as I mentioned in my memo, this Avista system wasn't designed, so we really didn't know how far we were going to have to go to get power. Now we know all those things because the system is designed. So one option is, again, if the board is inclined to adjust the budget, that $23,000, move forward with the 2 signs. The Heartwood sign is 56.5, and then so the total budget increase, if you were wanting to do both those things, would be 79.5. That's for both La Rivier's construction cost increase, and then the 7,500 for Avista service hookups, which we're estimating for those. So that's kind of the gist of the story.
Phil, do you think that it's better to just go ahead with the Heartwood sign? Is it more efficient to do that now than to do it later?
For sure, and these signs are, as you guys can probably tell, they're a relatively complicated sign. They're very, there's a lot of detail in them. They look very nice. They've been made to be extremely durable. So they're concrete and steel essentially. But to have somebody come back and build just that one, I anticipate the price would be considerably more than what we're getting proposed here, because we've got the economy of scale, which is probably your point, Chairperson Metz. Yeah.
And keeping with an aesthetic that's going to be consistent.
Yes. Yep. It's all the Del Hatch designed these, who also did the restroom building and everything else in the aesthetic parts of the project.
Commissioner English?
Sure. And I've been kind of a big sign proponent along the way. On the other hand, now when I look at, everything's almost settled into place and everything, and when I guess when I consider having 2 signs on, is it Celtice there? I mean, the big roundabout one, and then a little bit further, I guess I'm not sure that that's still money better spent than something else, but, I'm not going to go to the mat. But I am glad to see that we're going to get something somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the initial discussion was we wanted it up to help sell the properties, but then it just took so long to get the signage.
Yeah.
Where does for westbound traffic, would westbound traffic see that? Because it is a port of entry into the development. But if we already have one that the eastbound traffic, right, going towards Coeur d'Alene will see, then I don't see a huge added benefit to another one a quarter mile down the way. But if it's visible to westbound traffic heading towards Post Falls, then I do see a benefit.
You would see this one westbound. You would not see this one westbound. So you guys might remember there's a Michigan left right here.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of a kind of a clearer view path. The sign is not.
If they were looking quick.
Yep. And it's not an enormous sign. Mm-hmm. It's 10 feet tall in there, and it's got a 10-foot top beam width to it. These are lit, and so you would see that at nighttime. You would see it, but I think that's a valid point. In this direction, you may not see it. This one last comment about, I'll just show you guys this. I'm going to use this. This is the current layout of Phase 3, and so that sign would sit right in that corner there. This is pretty solid, this layout. This is shown as a twin home layout. It might go to single family, depending on what you all decide down the road, but for the most part, the road configuration is nailed down. This road may not be here. That road is for a fire station site, and whether this becomes a fire station or not a fire station is another decision for you all down the road, but that sign would be landed right about there.
Any other questions for Phil?
Well, I think just to add on that, that does refresh that when we were looking at this and, marketing the whole project, and we really didn't know, where it was going and all of that, but, almost all of the pieces, and we've really, when you weigh everything, have done well with it, and, so, yeah, I don't know that we, other than, I guess, having kind of another, monument for the future or something, but again, who knows what other things in that area might come up that, we might be looking for 50, 75,000 or something, so, or whatever it is.
56.5 for that
Okay,
sign.
yeah.
I know Commissioner Evans and Meyer were not on the board when we were going through all this, but what are your thoughts?
I have one question about near the potential fire station. Has there been any discussions with Chief Greif on that placement? If
Nope.
the station was to go in and,
Nope, there was, the extent of the discussions there is, City Administrator Troy Tymason had asked us when we were doing this layout, is there a way you could find a fire station site in there? And so we took the Atlas, the fire station that's up on Atlas Road, on the north part of Atlas Road, laid it in here. You can't really see it in there, but, so that configuration would accommodate it, but that's as far as we took it. Because it hadn't, I don't think Troy had taken it through the rest of that process. He just said, hey, can you put some flexibility into the system, in the design?
As a point of clarification, I don't understand the future management of some of this area. If it's a fully platted subdivision, is there a master HOA of any sort that might have jurisdiction to come back and add this later if the occupants wanted it, as opposed to fronting the public money now, when I think I agree with Commissioner English, the marketing part of this has rapidly exceeded our expectations, and so adding to it right now, I have to question the benefit statement for it at this point. So is there a management organization that might, at the election of the occupants, come back later and want to install that to facilitate resales or other kinds of property enhancements for the owners?
There is a master HO in the system. I think they could certainly consider, if they wanted to fund that for neighborhood identity, for stronger neighborhood identity, they could certainly elect to do that.
I guess I'd struggle with the value on the investment at this stage of the project.
Thank you.
So we would be looking for action on the board to give us direction on to proceed with 0 monuments, 1 monument, 2 monuments, or 3 monuments. What I'm hearing, it looks like the 2 monuments from the original conversation are where the board is leaning. Is that correct?
I would make a motion for, I think it's option 1, I can't quite.
Yep,
Okay.
option 1.
Okay, yep, that's the first 2 we had in mind, and, yep.
Yep.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
As a point of clarification, there's no current commitment to any signage at this point, simply to achieve neighborhood identity.
Right.
Again, in the original view of, we have a product to sell, we're really interested in making sure the community and the real estate market knows we're here and what we have to offer. At this point, is there a value of spending $400,000 to prove what the market has proved in abundance to us already, that these public dollars might have better uses later on in other enhancements that we don't know about at this point? The job of the sign is done at this point, perhaps.
Well-
So I'm trying to understand some of the history here, and I don't want to
Perhaps
overstate.
reduction in scale. I mean, signage is necessary, I believe, but do you need that extensive signage if we've already developed most of the property already? So I would say I'd like to see him maybe step back a little bit.
Well, I'll go back, my original thoughts, because I do like those 2, and it seems in my mind that we already cut the one at the trail down a little. Seems like
You
it
did.
was gonna have 2 halves, so we've already scaled it down. The major one, I guess I would say maybe I don't see it at this point as a real estate sales sign, and we did put lots of time and effort and going through, and so I think it's, and we also wanted this to be, an enduring, I don't know the right word, kind of first class, well-done project. And so I think that, at least in my mind, maybe not a legal commitment or something, but I think that we've had the strong consensus of that. So again, I'd go back, and we did scale the one down a little, so. And we fought over colors and design.
So Dan, I'm trying to get alignment with you, right,
Sure.
and where you're at. So you're saying your commitment to the signs is based on more the sense of place and identification of the quality of project.
Yes, that and just as a, and it's called it's a monument, not a sign. So it's, around the city, we have different things that is, and tells, it's the place marker.
Could potentially another option be to work with the Arts Commission for some art at those locations?
It's a good question.
In conjunction with signage? Or just the artwork?
Hypothetically, I guess you could do both. Usually when we commission a piece of art, it's for the art, and we can put some parameters on it that we're looking for art that represents the local history or, whatever that may be. I'm just wondering if we have other options to help create that sense of place and belonging. And I know community-wide, we put a lot of value on our extensive art collection, if that's what we're hoping to achieve. Is there other ways to do that?
We did, the artwork inside the roundabouts that are right there next to it, that was Art Commission Ignite collaboration money. And I believe there's some stuff, and maybe not specifically artwork, but within the park itself, there are old mill wheels.
That were donated.
Pardon me for
yeah.
being
Design,
ignorant of the right terminology, but, old things related to the mill and things like that we intentionally use to create a sense of place and a respect for the site. I'm on the fence about this one because $400,000 is an awful lot of money for a big sign, but we also said, you think about Coeur d'Alene Place, you think about other areas, they have some type of entrance or monument sign, and I wasn't around when they started, so I don't know if that was a sales part of it or not, but definitely identifies the community. It's at the entrance of every subdivision you go into practically. I think with the Heartwood sign or something potentially later, depending on what we do with that last area up there, I know some places do, like if they have a retaining wall or something, maybe they'll do cutout letters or something and just do something like that. Maybe that would be something that could be seen more easily going westbound as well.
Do we have a sense of because it seems like, I'm sure we didn't get to this point in the design and everything and picking for free. How much do we have invested in this, or do we know?
I don't know that number off the top.
Do we have something, I'm sure?
Yeah, sure, you've invested in professional service fees and a lot of time with the La
But
Riviera
with
precedent.
signage, and I remember the materials, there were a lot of
Yeah.
choices.
I'll also offer up that the purchasers, kind of by block, we'll say, have said, what is the neighborhood signage going to look like? And we have sent this image here to several people. We never articulated any kind of commitment, obviously, but we said this is the board's intention, is to put signage up that looks like this. I'm not sure that we ever sent this one or this one to anybody, but I do recall sending this one. Part of the reason that DeChase Mixis gave us the easement here is that they saw value in this and kind of at least, this particular sign. We didn't show them the other one. So I'll offer that up to the board as well. But totally appreciate all the comments about budget. And if the board was inclined to say, gosh, we're at the point we're at now, do we need all the signage? Maybe we should just be looking at one sign instead of both Suzanne and the Atlas sign, because there is, remember when you come down this, and you get right to here, there's a big sign right here that says, it does say Atlas Waterfront Park. So, but it's still
yeah,
a sense of
right down-
arrival
right
when
around
you
the
come
corner,
to it.
yeah.
And so, just toss those couple thoughts out for the board's consideration.
I could live with one, the big one.
Commissioner
But
Mandel? Go ahead.
I do think marking the place is important, just kind of for history too. Like right now, we all know, right? Those of us living here know it's Atlas. Well, not everybody, but in 5 or 10 years, and there's stuff filling in around it, kind of marking it as a defined project or area, I think has some value. It may not be real estate value, but so it may serve a different purpose now than what we thought 3 years ago. But I do think, does it need to be 400,000? Maybe not. I'm open to scaling it back budget-wise. But I think it is important at the major ports of entry, public-facing, to establish the place and mark it as a development. Because otherwise, it's just going to kind of roll into the rest of that area. So in 5 or 10 years, I think it's still important to know that that's sort of a defined development area. But I'm not wedded to the current design.
Commissioner Garcia?
Sorry. Phil, I'm having a hard time conceptualizing the large sign in front of the Bow Apartments and what that's going to do. I mean, I drive by there every single day.
Yeah.
And you can see the apartments, you can see the whole thing. Is it going to block?
It is going to actually block a portion of that building, and they're aware of it, which I think was part of the, because this sign is about 11 feet tall,
Okay.
and it's 24 and a half feet wide.
So is it set off the trail?
It is,
Kind of behind the trail?
yeah, so here is, if you can see up on the screen here, this is the Celtice Trail right here,
Okay.
and it comes down, and then the Bow Apartments are like right on that dashed line, so it sits just in front of it.
Okay.
And we worked through that a fair amount with the Chase mixes, because they wanted to understand how it was gonna look, and they were fine the way that it was presented in front of their building, but they also put a lot of value in, I say they put a lot of value, they were very willing to give us an easement in order to get that sign there. That's the proper way to
And
characterize it.
so is it at the same level as the trail?
It is at the same level of the trail, which is why it has the retaining wall right there, because as you know, the bows are kind of set down in there a little bit.
And also just, I drive by there 3-4 times a day too. At least in my mind, I can kind of picture, for those lower people, it will, actually, if I were them at night, I might be happy to have it there. The headlights that probably come around the roundabout won't be going in there. Is it kind of the right place?
That is true, and you'll actually notice
Yeah,
in
and
the
right
back
now,
of-
they're just seeing the roundabout, so.
Yeah, and at the back of this is the foundation plan of that. And you'll see that there's landscaping on the back of the wall, which was part of the negotiation with the Chase, is in order to not have to pay for the easement. And we negotiated putting back, they have landscaping in there now, so we're gonna tear it out and put some things back in there. We'll salvage what we can.
If I may, circle back to Commissioner Mandel's comments, I absolutely agree there's a value in placemaking inherently, that if this is a neighborhood, it should be defined. However, I think about what I recall from the public dialogue of creating this location, trying to, create a series of interconnected neighborhoods down on the waterfront, that Riverstone flows into the Atlas Mill District, which flows on beyond that. And there's not monuments that define Sanders Beach, there's not monuments that define the Garden District. Those things have an organic ebb and flow to them. So a lot of times, a major subdivision will be named as a place to create a place where none exists before. That used to be wheat fields, where now Coeur d'Alene Place exists when I was a kid. So there's a purpose for that at a certain stage of the private sector development to manage risk. But if I think about our organization's mission, would we rather have $400,000 in our pocket to address some of the housing issues we've talked about, give ourselves more flexibility on other phases of this project? What's the opportunity cost? And I have the blessing and curse of being fresh to this idea to say, wait a minute, why should we be doing this at all with public dollars that at this point, are they increasing the effectiveness of our organization's mission by adding a big sign to properties that have already sold for above what we expected them to sell? Or is there a better opportunity that we have to redeploy those funds into something that will advance the strategic objectives of the Urban Renewal Agency? So I respectfully want to test the values that are there, but coming at it from a fresh perspective, I feel like we're dogpiling onto something that isn't as necessary anymore from at least a economic motivation standpoint. We shouldn't be investing any more dollars to try to sell any more houses that have already been successfully sold, I guess. So I'm testing.
And I'll offer up, just other than the expectation that some of the buyers are anticipating seeing that sign. And so there may be some, and I don't know if Tony has a comment
I
on that.
so wish I could articulate it as well as you did. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That I'd like to see it scaled down. That money could be used better elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Phil, do you happen to know, break out the cost for that Atlas?
Yeah, I don't know the cost in this bundle right here, because this is both the Atlas and the Suzanne sign. And we do not, I don't have the breakout of those, but we could certainly get that number and revisit this next month.
And for the purposes of the thought experiment, take Heartwood, plug it in at the main entrance, $56,000. Case closed, we have $350 in our pocket.
Yeah, I think the magnitude of that sign may be,
I'm squinting at your dimension lines.
yeah.
Paint me a picture, Phil.
It's 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide, the top part of it.
That's
yeah.
not small, Phil.
Yeah, yeah. Again, what was originally portrayed to the folks that are in that neighborhood, and I'm indifferent on what you all want to do. I just want to make sure you're making the decision on all the information that we have exchanged with folks that are out there. And I'm not, it could be that we might want to test that idea with the Commissioner Meyer's idea about, do you switch to this sign? I anticipate they're going to say they want that sign.
Or, do we know, are we confident that they want a sign at this stage?
I know that there's at least two of
developers,
the
yeah.
developers in that area that have said, what is the signage going to look like? And at some point, I would have sent them that rendering and said, that's the one the board intends to put in there. And I always use the word intend, because I'm never going to commit you guys to anything. So the intentions can obviously change for lots of reasons, several that Commissioner Meyer just pointed out.
That's a different question than, do the developers feel like there needs to be a sign? As a developer, I could say, like, I want to see it to make sure I like it, or to design around that, or versus, like, I don't know, I've got my thing branded in my aesthetic. I don't really care if there's another sign.
Well, remember,
there's two different questions, right?
Yeah, they're in sales mode though, because just because you all sold the dirt to them doesn't mean that they had turned
Yeah.
around and sold the
Okay.
houses. And so Tony can comment on this as well. There's been anxiety, I'll say, from many of the builders in that area about the absorption of the product type that they're in there. And of course, the prices are maybe part of that problem, but that's not for us to decide. But I will tell you that they are still marketing heavy. And I think neighborhood identity contributes to
Okay.
the ability for them to do that.
So Commissioner English, does your motion still stand?
Yeah, I'm not, again, a diehard in this, but and actually I feel like I've got a good record of support. In terms of the opportunity costs and other things that, we could spend and stuff, I promote some of that in the housing. On the other hand, if we didn't in some of our structure, if we didn't have that, whatever that is, 0.5% or whatever the fee that we give to the public arts, which do a wonderful thing, but we just said, like some of our constituents say, well, that's wasted. It'd be better to just have that money go back in, or less, this or that. So I think, I would, so was I for the? Okay, what I will.
Or do we want to table it for next month?
I think I'm amending my motion. I will
Legal monuments.
make a motion to do just the roundabout sign although we don't have a hard cost, you can get back, that it's going to be something less than, I'm willing to take off because again, at the trail there and everything, actually, it might even be more dangerous. I mean, yeah, people are used to the trail entrance, and we do have the one not very far from there that says all Atlas Water Park, and in my mind, it's all one package. And so just for the roundabout as we're, have it now, but I guess we don't have an exact price.
Go ahead, Tony.
It's just an idea of, if Commissioner English is willing, we can withdraw the motion, table the issue, and do some more work, get some costs ironed out, do a little search or sensing with the owners there to see what their expectations are, if they've been using it in their marketing materials, if there's an expectation or a demand. That we could come back to the board in June with some more information and let you kind of ruminate on the issue in the meantime.
Yes, he'd be happy to withdraw the motion.
May I ask one more
Yes.
question just before, I hate to beleaguer the topic, but I am curious. Phil, did we ever have a conversation about putting a sign on either side at the Atlas entrance rather than one large monument sign? I'm just asking if that was
did.
ever considered.
It was,
Okay.
this sign was on that side, and a version of this sign was on the other side. But when we were preliminarily budgeting, the board said, gosh, do we really need two signs there? Let's put one sign there and save the money. So we took the sign off on the west side of Atlas.
I just wonder if we put one of the small signs on either side rather than the large sign, if that might be a compromise potentially.
That's a really good question to ask, and we can have, back to, I think, Commissioner Meyer's point is, do we take this sign and put one on each side and create?
That's where I got the idea,
Okay.
is could we kind of cut the cost in half
Yeah.
and put
even
those
less.
smaller signs on either side of that entryway, and that could give that sense without having that monster monument out there.
I think this is a good example of back in the day. I mean, some of our most intense, longish discussions were over the sign.
sign.
And the color and the design, and
Definitely was.
it touches some chord in people, so.
But I think also to Commissioner Meyer, there are other ways, natural ways of marking space, right? Through landscaping and like the natural border on Saltese that we've talked about that also mark place. But I mean, right now, Google Maps marks the place that you want to go. So I think there's alternative ways to define the space than the initial monument concept. But
Well, we will go back and dig into the pricing, separate out the pricing, develop essentially more options on this table for the board to look at. You'll get a memo ahead of time so you can contemplate it, and then we'll revisit it in June.
That sounds great.
Okay?
Thanks,
Thank you,
Phil.
Phil,
Very
very
good, we'll
much.
do that.
So do you have a project update as well? Is
I
that-
do.
Okay.
Okay.
And so we'll start with our favorite earth-moving project. And just, again, to refresh the board's memory, the area that we're focused on is this area. The majority of this back in here has already been remediated, and so we've been focusing on this area. You remember the Atlas Hall project that you authorized last month. The first step in that was starting to mine into this area. To again, kind of refresh your memory on the layout, we had to have a layout to design to a finished grade. So we knew what quantities we were working with. And it is an iterative process because we can only borrow so much from the Atlas borrow site north of I-90 and only create so much space over there to backhaul non-structural soils there. So we iterated through the design process, created this finished grade that you see here in this subdivision layout. And the reason I kind of keep beating this horse a little bit is to let you know that to some point, you're kind of committed to this layout. Here, it's shown as a twin home configuration. We've received some feedback from some of the developers in the neighborhood that, gosh, twin homes may not be the greatest product there from a sales standpoint. So they would not be super interested in a twin home layout. It might be better to be a single family home layout, which we could change this configuration. Your lot count would go down, but in theory, the per lot price might go up a little bit. But I just want to make sure that the board is kind of aware that we're to some extent committed to this layout. We had planned to try to make this area of the project structural soils, even though it is a courtyard. And this was a configuration, we did a bunch of research. Hillary Patterson at the city was a big contributor to help us look at the different types of product that might go in here. I showed some imagery to the board maybe a year and a half ago. You might remember that, the different ideas for the cottage court layout. But if we were to make that buildable soil, in theory, it creates a little bit of more flexibility in here, and I will use the word multifamily, like if you had to go convert this to multifamily because you wanted to really drive the price point down, you would have this big area to put parking lots and bigger buildings in. The challenge we have run into is and remember, we were estimating the amount of non-structural soils in the neighborhood here. And as we started mining back into this corner here, and particularly on the top here, the quantity of non-structural soils is continuing to go up. And so our exit strategy, I'll use, that we had talked with Tony about early on, and I think we even I mentioned it to the board, that if push came to shove, this courtyard area may need to go to non-structural, because it's just going to be a big green area, so why put a bunch of structural soils in it? That's the point that we're at now, and we're headed down this path because you all have kind of authorized a certain amount of money to make this happen, and so we're working to stay within that budgeted money to create this subdivision layout, and we believe we're going to accomplish that. But I just want to make sure the board is with me, and I'm not out in front of my skis, so to speak, making decisions you all don't know about. So I'll kind of pause there and see if there's any questions or comments on that.
I think the one question I have for you is if the fire station doesn't go in there, does that layout change?
No, this layout is, so for the fire station to go in here, someone would need to build a very expensive retaining wall right here in order to put this parcel of property on, we'll call it the Southeast Way grade, because you need to be able to come in this way and then exit this way on the Southeast Way grade. If the fire station doesn't go in here, what we'll do is we'll bottom load or load, this building could be built here, and the building essentially could act as part of the retaining wall. You see this very steep slope that comes up in here, and so you could either drive in off of Topsaw into the garages here, which we really don't like that configuration, or we would put a little spur driveway similar to this one down here, and we would rear load these, which is a much better configuration because you guys know why. And so it's just, that's kind of the path we're headed down. But again, as part of our negotiations on the Atlas Hall site, we agreed to configure, Ignite agreed to configure a fire station site in here to give the city the option. And I think it was kind of a gentleman's agreement between, I don't want to speak for Tony, but for Tony and Troy, it was kind of a gentleman's agreement. So Tony said, design a fire station site in there. So that's what
And that's what we did, and as Commissioner Evans points out, sooner or later, we need to have some resolution. If there's a city desire to actually locate one there, then we need to know that probably sooner than later. But for now, we kind of have a placeholder for it, and it doesn't really skew us one way or the other, but sooner or later, we need to make a call.
Okay.
But sorry,
No, go ahead.
the call, I mean, it's not that they need to put one in soon, right? It's just we need to know if it's at a 5 to 7 year plan, 3, 5, 7 years, right? So if the city doesn't want to exercise that option right now, that's okay. We just need to know if it would be on a
Yeah, but
longer-term
we would need to
plan.
carve that out of our offering. We would need to
Yeah.
design it to make sure we have a
what we need to
retaining
know.
wall in there, and I mean, if that would be a board decision of kind of letting go of some property to give it to the city, basically, and then at their time frame, they would have the money and spend the money to build the fire station and retaining wall. As you recall, our abilities to help on that have greatly decreased due to legislative changes here in the past couple of years. So we can't really be a huge partner in a fire station, but we can still play a role based on what the cost of the fire station is.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, on this project topic and talking about the hauling project, how is it going with the trail and the flaggers? And are people able to ride their bike when they need to?
At the Atlas
Yeah,
Barrow
yeah.
site, we have not actually started, there's
Oh,
been
yeah.
a small amount of work started over there, but we have not, La Riviere has not started hauling in earnest.
Okay.
From there, and partly I'll spin through the rest of these pictures and kind of show you why here. There, you can see the operation is pretty extensive, and reducing a long story to a much shorter story, part of the negotiations with, that we go through with La Riviere in trying to stay into budget is working through the efficiency with which the work can be executed. And so we're obviously adding things to their ticket, so to speak, but we don't have any more money because the board gave a fixed amount of money for us to execute this work. So we try to work within that to best of our can to negotiate deals with him. So part of the negotiation has been, let's get this site completely tidied up, ready for the haul, then he can very efficiently execute that haul from the Atlas site, which is good for the citizen because it goes faster. It's good for him because he can execute it faster and it's more efficient for him. Originally, we were going to do simultaneous operations, both here and at the Atlas site at the same time, which you can get into a collaboration there. And so that's why the haul has not started
But
from.
just to confirm, at some point when they are doing that, there will be flaggers, so it
Yes.
won't ever totally shut out of there.
Correct. Yep, that was part of the deal. Just a couple more photos, you can see that this is the excavation and embankment project, the process that's going on there. Any other?
Commissioner Meyer?
One other follow-up question, Phil. The point you made about putting non-structural soils in that green space.
Yes.
Actually, your
Yep.
subdivision was perfect. What are the intended ownership options of that green space? Does that get sold to the adjacent developer as a package? Is it kept as community HOA common space or a park? Or
It would end up being our vision is it would end up being a tract owned perhaps by a sub-HOA in here, but not necessarily a public space because it would be an amenity to the people that surround it. And so they would become responsible for it, which is why, I guess, kind of digging into some of the details, we're spending a lot of time looking at where building foundations will go, because ultimately we anticipate defining building envelopes on the plat. So it's very apparent where you can build. There's a geotech report that will go with this, that when Ignite gets ready to sell it, you're handing them the plat and the geotech report that shows the building footprint. Will very accurately describe what was put in here, and it will be documented. But we anticipate it would become an amenity to that neighborhood right there.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Phil? Do you have
Just-
any other updates?
Just the last one,
Okay.
I'll just show you guys a couple of pictures here that on 2B, the portion just to the west, we're still plugging along. La Riviere is plugging on, putting in curb, sidewalk. I think I had told the board last month, they intended to pave June 6th. They're asking now, hey, can we pave in July 15th or something? The reason that they want to move that pave date is because Avista hasn't been able to get in there and put in the dry utilities, and they don't particularly want to put in the asphalt before Avista finishes putting in the dry utilities, because if Avista damages the asphalt, it's usually the contractor, La Riviere, would be responsible for it. We don't have a big issue with extending that. I don't know that the board would, but we just wanted to make you aware that if you don't see it being paved in June and you're wondering why the heck I thought this was going to be paved in June, the developer in that area, Smock Development, does not care. We checked with them and they said they're fine. They're not getting ready to start any work either. So Commissioner Retz, that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, sorry. Didn't mean to push you through. I just
Yeah.
thought you were done. Any other questions for Phil? No? Tony, do you have anything?
Danielle brings up a good point. We just want to make sure, if you can bring back up your plat layout with the, that area. We just want to make sure the board understands, Phil's comments about the non-structural fill in that courtyard area, that it will be there and it will be non-buildable, and that it would be used by the surrounding lots as more of that cottage concept where people go out their backyard and kind of mingle and have a playground there or whatever they decide to put in there, but it will be non-structural. We just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
And the switch to single-family home probably, most likely versus the double home or the.
That'll be a decision for the board down the road. You might recall that we're kind of going to park this area, so to speak, let some more absorption to occur in the rest of the Atlas development because they are working, there's a little bit of a struggle with absorption out there right now. And then as we get further down the road, we would be bringing back a couple of scenarios for you guys to look at. And I think the decision will ultimately lie here, Commissioner Chapkus.
Thank you.
Is the feeling from the developers about twin homes a market feeling or just a twin homes overall? By sharing a wall, they're just harder to market? Or do we think it's a short term, like not right now?
It was
or
in
is
their
it a
personal
longer term?
experience. They actually have twin home product in other parts of Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene, and they had not had a strong, it wasn't a big seller for them. They went and developed twin homes thinking it was going to be a big seller. It hasn't been a big seller, so they were tossing out that cautionary tone. But it was really just in general conversations, which those are the types of conversations we have been having with the buyers in the neighborhood, just to, hey, what do you think? Ignite's going to consider this at some point. What would your guys' feelings be on it? Because I think the direction, at least I feel like I've received for the boards, is we want to be respectful to the buyers around this neighborhood. And that was the comment we got out of one of the developers, is they didn't have good success with it.
I mean, it kind of falls in our constant tension of density versus market, right?
Yeah.
There was a hope, and I think even if I remember right, Cortair had given similar indications about concerns with twin home versus smaller
Single
single
family.
family.
Yep, and that was the suggestion that this developer said to us, is I would think you would be better off, Ignite would be better served doing a smaller, single-family product.
Just briefly, ignorant question, but what is the difference between a twin home and duplex?
A duplex is one lot. One owner owns the entire lot, and there's two different dwelling units on it with a common wall. In a twin home, you and I share a common wall, but you own your parcel and I own my parcel.
Thank you.
Danielle, I think you had something to say.
I guess that I just wanted to make sure that the board understands that, if we let this sit for a while, that when we go back to look at it in a couple of years, we won't be able to just redesign it from scratch, right? We're always going to be designing anything that the board wants to do to move forward around that, kind of triangle in the middle.
Yeah.
Understood.
And I'm sure it changes the pro forma slightly.
I guess to dive a little further in that, do we know the opportunity cost? Even though now we've discovered more unsuitable soils, you had some metrics about cost per yard to bring in good stuff to keep our options wider open. What is that opportunity cost for us? Maybe I just found 250 grand we could spend on it. Phil.
Yeah, it's a really good, it's a really good question. I was running those with Tony earlier today because he asked me that same exact question. And it's just, when we were running it really quickly, it's about a $200,000, $250,000.
There you go.
And just totally coincidental.
Make a deal.
On it. And then there would also be a time element to it, because right now, we're getting after it. And if the board's direction today was, which was the point of bringing this topic up, was, we're not so certain we're comfortable with that, we want to rethink that, then what we would do is we would go get organized with LaRiviere, find a good stopping point, and say, okay, you guys need to stop for a second, because we need to go figure out where we can haul, can we haul this unsuitable, the non-structural soils anywhere else? Perhaps back to Ramsey, but that opens up another negotiation with ITD, which Tony has been doing great with them and Troy. We're not sure if that would be fruitful, but those are the paths we would head down. But it is that if we were to haul it there, it would probably drive the project cost up $250,000 to haul the material there.
Makes sense.
And again, that's the whole point of me bringing this forward to the board, is to make sure you all are, if you want me to head down that path, that's what we're going to do. Because literally I had this discussion, thinking this through on Monday, because, we're moving lots of material. And we worked through the logistics on Tuesday with La Riviere, and here I am on Wednesday briefing you all on it. And I just want to make sure that we're headed down the path you want us to head down.
Is there a number of lots? I forget. I think you showed us another plan that had this fully built out with no open space to it. We recovered another 10 or 12 lots, if I remember right.
I think I think it was something on that order, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, just from the point of view of having to sell another transport project on Ramsey and all of the implications, yeah, I'm not, at some point, yeah, we've kind of crossed the thing. And actually, I really like this concept of the some green space somewhere in there, and so, yeah, I think it's a nice part of the whole package versus just super sardine tight pack.
That's a good point, Commissioner English, and just to kind of bring back that, we did develop, kind of this really high-density configuration, and then we went through and we developed this configuration, and ultimately, kind of the team, which includes Heartland, Hillary Patterson, and looked at this and thought, well, this is a pretty marketable configuration, whether it's in a small single family, or whether it's in a twin home configuration. But this amenity of having this green space in there was considered a nice amenity, but there is a cost to it, as Commissioner Meyer pointed out.
I think earlier in the graphics, do you have a master plan? Back again, Phil?
It's an old one.
In concept, at least.
Yeah.
Memory for a minute.
Th-
That one
There
forward.
was one version, this is an earlier version, and this is an old version.
But here, if I remember the discussions of the amount of public space that was created in the initial acquisition and redevelopment of this opportunity is somewhere in the range of 12 acres or more, the Riverfront Park and the Atlas Mill Park.
The Riverfront Park is 12 acres. This parcel up in here is about 9 acres.
Right. So the relative ratio, I guess, to zoom out and say on a neighborhood build-out, is the access to waterfront in the existing waterfront park a compelling enough reason to want to live there, rather than having another little pocket park in your backyard?
Yep.
Where's the point of diminishing returns on the utilization of the resident at some point? And as we talk about, the increased density and driving price points lower to continue to spread the spectrum of citizens of our community who can afford to live here, preserving the option to add more density is not, I think it has some merit, I guess, as we consider today, especially if we have, perhaps unintentionally, a creative way of offsetting these costs. But preserving that optionality, I'm interested in exploring that further.
Can use the money from the monuments to put.
And that, Commissioner Mayor, that's the very point of me bringing this up to you guys, is just to make sure I'm in alignment with your direction. And if the direction is, hey, we're not so prepared to give that away, then when I walk out the door, I'll start making some phone calls, and we'll start pausing a little bit here, and then Tony's got to start to work its magic.
I hate to impose another negotiation like that, but, I mean, if that would be limited only to that particular subdevelopment, right? Because it's not public access, right? So there's not public benefit derived from keeping that green space.
Correct.
Correct.
There's an opportunity cost in density.
Is there any thought on what the additional value to that property would be with that green space if they went single family? I mean, is that desirable? Is that something that a homeowner would pay more for to have access to, or is it substantial?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't have a good answer to that, Commissioner
And
Chapkus.
it also comes down to the board's decision probably in the near future about, do we provide any subsidy to this to make it, local worker housing, which kind of brings a whole different flavor to this versus just completely market rate density. We make the most we can off this. Are we going to, kind of underwrite this in some form? And then that kind of brings a different complexion to the conversation about what we do here. So, but we're caught in time here of trying to get the site buildable, and we have an opportunity to bring all this material in, and it's kind of a very fluid situation right now. So that's kind of why we're here. We got the contractor underway, and as Phil says, if the board's not comfortable with this, then we need to stop and kind of understand the repercussions of that, and then kind of, continue the redesign of this.
As a point of clarification, in the original assumptions, barring the unforeseen conditions of the additional unsuitable material, we would have had a completely buildable site, very flexible, very moldable into whatever the market and the board decided this section should be. So what we've added through the discovery of these unforeseen circumstances is a bit of a backtrack to say, we're going to give up the ability to have maximum flexibility on layouts and plating.
Actually, originally, we had always intended for this to be non-structural.
Okay?
Yeah.
That was the first, and our pro formas were based on that. And the reason for that was because when we were concepting this early on, we had nowhere to haul the non-structural soils. Then, when we got a hold of the Atlas site, originally it was gonna be just a borrow, where we were just gonna borrow structural soils from it. And we were wing digging it one night. I should use a more elaborate word. We were designing one night, and we started thinking about, wait a second, if we were to excavate out this other section adjacent to the Atlas Trail, we could borrow all of that structural soils, we'll backhaul, and maybe we can turn this into a structural site. So then the board has this longer flexibility. So then we briefed Tony on it one day, and he says, yeah, I like that idea. So we forge ahead on that concept. And now we're kind of back to square one. From honestly a disappointing standpoint for us, because we thought it was a great idea, and we're headed down that path, and we've kind of reluctantly ended up back here. But the whole point of this discussion is to make sure that if you guys are not comfortable with this going non-structural, then we need to pause the project and kind of rethink our direction. But it was originally intended to be non-structural.
So then is the quick math correct that if for $250,000 to create 12 more buildable lots, it's $20,000 of additional basis per lot? And we're selling those lots for,
I think in this, there's sub 100 in the twin home configuration. In the single family, they might be in the 125 number, and I probably shouldn't quote those
that
numbers.
range,
but
75 to 120.
yeah.
But either way, there's a margin in it.
Yeah.
To invest this now, create the buildable area, preserve the flexibility.
Assuming you use the buildable area in the future, if this were to change, because it could be we go invest that money and we end up right where we're at in this configuration.
And it assumes, and it brings up the question of the underwriting. I mean, we have to bridge that river sooner or later about, is the board willing or wanting to underwrite this in any way? Then spending money to relocate material is cash out of the pocket versus trying to recover that through sales if we're going to underwrite it in an affordable way. So it's, I think the math gets a little more complicated depending on a future decision by the board about what role you want to play in local worker housing, if you do it all. If you want to go market rate, and we can make that decision sooner than later, then I think it opens up it clarifies the design from now on. But I don't know if the board has made that call yet.
I don't think it's, well, I can't speak for the board, but I mean, I don't think we've had it brought to us in a more formal way, but I mean, I feel like from our workshop with council, I thought we had a pretty strong feeling from mayor and council on what their feelings are, but maybe I'm wrong. There was some, yeah, market versus for attainable housing, but there were also some things that we needed to look into as well, I believe, that they wanted before making that decision. So I don't know, I guess I'll leave it back to.
Is it, as a point of clarification then, Tony, I understand your point. Is it possible, can we distinguish making this maneuver to improve our ability to add more density to the site versus the policy decision to try to subsidize the attainable housing model? That we could allow for more density with a broader footprint for a multifamily developer to put density on that location at market rate with the soils investment as compared to a policy decision to make to write down the basis of the lots to achieve attainability.
Right, I think if the board wanted to go market rate, I think the path forward for us is pretty clear about what we want to do to get as much market rate density on there as possible. We could spend money and then recoup that money. if the board does not want to go completely market rate there and underwrite or, subsidize some level of affordable housing, then I think we have to be mindful of the cash outlays to get us to that point, especially if we're not going to recover it from land sale revenues and tax increment. 'cause it'll all
There was
be-
also a mention how the density would affect the other homes surrounding it.
You're right on the next point I was going to make, Commissioner Chapkus, is that in order to get more density here, we're probably changing product type and we're moving into a multifamily product type. And maybe it's not, 3-story walk-ups, but it could be more townhomes kind of wedged in here, because that layout that you see here on the screen is the most dense layout we were able to achieve, considering the topography and everything else in there. So I think this is where you're headed, Commissioner Chapkus, is we would be changing product type in here and going to either a 3-story woody walk-up or more townhome type product in here to achieve that density. So that's the other consideration for the board, is do you want to change product type in this neighborhood? Lots of things to think about.
So we're just thinking about all these things, right?
You're thinking about all these things, but we're underway out there right now on a plan that looks like this.
Yeah.
So that's the timeliness of this conversation.
We've had a concern about like swinging and coming up just short of attainable housing, right? So underwriting or developing that piece so that it is buildable, but we still get to single-family homes that are still not local workforce, that are still not quite attainable or accessible, because it's not actually a policy decision, it's still market rate. In the workshop, we talked about the risk of like coming up just short of attainable housing. So there would be a cash outlay with no certainty that the return would be attainable housing. I don't know if that makes sense, that we were concerned that we still may get small single-family homes that are $450,000, $500,000. And so we're not quite hitting where we feel like the attainable workforce housing price point needs to be, but also in this case with an outlay. So I think that's a risk, right? I don't know how to calculate it perfectly, but we could do this and still not quite get to the point of attainable housing without an additional policy decision or investment. And I don't know if there's a way to calculate that, probably not, but that would be my concern, is that we'd come up just short of what we're trying to achieve on the workforce housing.
Is there a number, a price, or a price point that you're looking at, or?
Well, we don't know, like,
I know.
we know what's not attainable, but I don't know if we
Market
know
rate.
what is attainable, right? I mean, when we think about teachers and nurses none of this would probably be attainable for service industry, but for
25%
young
of salary,
professionals, entry-level, first home buyers, right? 500,000, I think, is still too high. And so getting a developer and incentivizing the developers enough to create a product that's attainable probably would require the multifamily.
Or underwriting the land, as Tony mentioned. Yeah.
That was not a helpful comment. I acknowledge that, but I just realizing that when we've talked about this before, that we've realized that there's a risk in just coming up short of housing that would
Yeah.
truly be
And I think-
accessible to the workforce.
And I think Tony's point, the more you invest in the land, less you have to help underwrite
Yeah.
later.
Kind of painting ourselves into a corner.
Yeah, even if and it doesn't have to be all, one of the scenarios we talked about are some of the parcels here attainable, not the entire subdivision necessarily, but are you taking, of the 68 lots in there, are you putting, 20 of them into an attainable configuration, the rest of them are market rate?
I guess for clarification, when I hear multifamily, I'm thinking, either apartments, which is just rental units, or condos. But what else are we talking with, to me, that's like, whoa, that's a sea change to go from, but I don't think affordable workforce housing, firefighters and nurse kind of thing is, if we're just talking apartments, maybe condos, but I'm not even sure about that with kids and stuff, so, okay, clarify, what are we talking?
You're pretty much talking apartments for multifamily, I believe, in this
Yeah.
market. I don't
Yeah.
believe you're talking condos.
Okay. Then that's probably off, I mean, I can't imagine that being on the table, but,
Having this parcel, this segment in the middle being buildable soils gives you the flexibility to make that decision, to put multifamily in this neighborhood, if you were to choose to do that down the road. If we make this non-structural, it becomes very difficult to put multifamily in this area, because you can't build it and park it on structural soils.
yeah. And I'm not even thinking the actual building, no, I'm thinking on other dimensions of community,
Yeah.
probably the political sphere versus the, buildable stuff, so. And community expectations and.
So Tony, do you want us to decide whether we want to go market rate or attainable now? No,
Or to keep that green space up.
because I feel like you're wanting,
Yeah,
it's not an agenda. That's what I was thinking before, but
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
not on the
like,
agenda for an action item. Yeah, we just need, as Phil points out, we're kind of underway out there. And if the board wants us to reconsider, making the entire site buildable, I think we need that direction to kind of pause what we're doing, reconsider about how we're going to address that, deal with the unsuitable, and then find more structural someplace, because ITD, the deal with ITD is not allowing us to do that. So we'd have to find it someplace else, buy it, or whatever. But it's a different analysis than we're at right now. So we would probably need that direction so that we can be efficient and be fair to the contractor and kind of be fair to our consultants to pause or continue.
So
so,
just to clarify,
Somebody make-
essentially this decision though, to pause and to maybe adjust our way with this green space will set the stage for what we can do in the future. So we are somewhat making the decision, even though it's not on the agenda, but we're setting the stage for what we can do in the future by what we determine tonight.
I mean, I think that you'll still have latitude to decide how much, if at all, you want to underwrite these parcels to become or participate in some sort of a, workforce housing, local worker housing project, or go totally market rate. I think what you're foreclosing is just the possibility of a redesign, material redesign of this site for any purpose, be it market or attainable.
And just to refresh kind of the board's memory, when we did the pro formas and we originally showed the math, however many meetings ago, it was always based on this configuration, with this being a green space. So the decision that you've made in the past were market rate, twin home product. Here's how much money we're gonna go spend to create that. Here's the net coming off of it. You guys might remember that, because we had some other inquiries from the city council about what we were doing and whatnot. And so we went through a pretty careful pro forma on this that the board made a decision on. At the time, this was intended to be non-structural. We were just trying to take the opportunity at the Atlas Hall, if we could make it structural. We just thought, man, that's another win, because then it opens up flexibility for the board. And if you all change your mind in 9 months, we wanted to have been able to provide you that flexibility. I guess what I'm here now saying is, if you still want that flexibility that maybe you didn't really know about in great detail, I need to pause for a second and retool things, because we're headed down the path that we originally set. That
Are
this
the
would be.
developers still interested with the multifamily? If it were to change, would there still be the same demand for just the property, to develop the property?
I anticipate Commissioner English hit it on the head, that if we looked at putting multifamily in there, we would have anxiety from the surrounding neighbors.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, and we would also have some pushback just from the,
People in general.
maybe city council folks might push back a little bit on that.
Yeah, yep.
This is really hard, because I think, when we talk about the attainable housing situation, I kind of feel like no one else is taking that leap around here right now, and I would love it if we could take that leap. And I understand some of the concerns, but even if our houses are just under that number, they're gonna be a lot less than anything else that's being built around here. You know, I think it's hard to make these decisions, but I feel fairly comfortable with this plan and the idea of having that non-structural in the middle. I realize there's an opportunity cost to it. I realize that I'm not a big fan of closing doors for future planning, but on the other hand, I've also watched how much it costs to do the haul between the ITD pit and Ramsey Road, and how difficult it was to get this fill that we've got now, that structural fill, not the fill, you fill. But you're expensive too. But worth it. But I guess I'm kind of leaning towards, I think there's been a lot of work been put into where we got to now, and I'm hesitant to put a pause on something when, you know, yeah, the number being thrown out is 250, and maybe that's what we're gonna set, you know, save on the monument sign, but what if it ends up being $1 million? Because we have to buy soil, and we have to import it from somewhere far away, and this is fairly well hatched versus what we haven't done is not very well hatched at this point. And I kind of feel like I want to trust the work that's been done and allow us to move forward, understanding that we are tying our hands a little bit. But if we know we're not going multifamily and we're going to stay single family, this makes sense
I agree.
in a lot of ways. So it's tough though. I'm very torn, I have to admit, but I do kind of want to trust the work that's gotten us to where we are right now. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I support this,
Any
but I
other?
made the last motion. So.
Well, we can't make a
Well,
motion.
we're not making a
We
motion.
can't make a decision.
That's right,
We just
we're
have to
giving
have
consensus.
consensus.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So is it safe to say that the direction from the board is to continue on this path that we've outlined,
With the non-structural or with,
the non-structural as
Yes.
presented?
that would be my,
I think the only other option would be to ask for cost estimate, to do the calculations of the opportunity cost and the cost, the investment cost, and do all that. And then I know that's a lot of work, and I don't know how long
Well,
that would
and the
take. but
timing
that
of
would
the
be-
guys out there.
That would be the way to do due diligence if that's what we wanted to do.
I guess I struggle with making a consensus decision when it's not on the agenda and we don't have everybody here too, but also it seems like there's not quite a full consensus, so,
Well,
I don't know.
could I maybe suggest that we ask Phil and Tony to take a look at some calculations of what that opportunity cost and the investment cost to change that over based on what we know today? And then we put that on the agenda for next month?
Is
Is
that
too
soon
long?
enough?
Is that too far away?
We could also do a special meeting
Yeah. I'd be willing.
sooner.
Yeah.
Well, one of the challenges we have is we have to find a home for the non-structural. And I'm not sure where that might be, and I'm not sure when that might be. So that's kind of the real unknown that we would be dealing with here, is to figure out a place to take it.
what about
And
that
would we
new
have to
park on
pay
Atlas?
to-
got some room in my
You
backyard.
have to pay to get rid of it?
If I remember right, there's tipping fee, I mean, you've identified the unit costs before, when we didn't have the backhaul with the Ramsey Road situation, about on the open market, it costs this much to buy the good stuff and this much to get rid of the bad stuff. So there's a worst-case financial scenario, I suppose, which Tony's done a masterful job of finding the exchanges in the marketplace right now, and there's other opportunities for it, perhaps.
For the non-structural,
Correct.
it would be, other than tipping it at one of the pits, which we're not certain they would actually take it, because it is
Huge.
woody debris might be an understatement of what it is, because it is very woody debris, some of the woodiest debris we have encountered. And so there's not a lot of folks who want that. And even getting it shaped into a finished product will be a little bit of a challenge here. But we're gonna, anyway, there's a bunch of details in it. But it would be, Tony brings up a good point, is just finding some place to put it will pause us for some
Yeah.
period of time that it's really hard to wrap our head around. It took us 3 months to get the Atlas Hall site negotiated.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
We have a stalemate.
Yeah, it's not, I think we're just all struggling because we want to be part of a solution for a housing issue that we know exists. I feel like this is a very small slice of a bigger issue, and we're grasping at it, trying to like salvage what we can as a solution, but my concern is just the time and the cost, and even with some subsidization, if we're still market rate, that doesn't mean we keep that margin, right? The developer, unless there's some other policy decision around that, I don't know that we actually pass on that benefit to the ultimate residents. If it's still a market rate solution, but we're just underwriting a little bit. So my worry is we could make a big time and cost investment and still not hit the solution that we're all here struggling with, right? It's like
I might just
another,
add in here on that point, Commissioner Mandel, is that the visual that you see here can be designed and sold at all as market rate, or it could be all local worker housing. I mean, the board has the latitude to kind of partially underwrite it to make it kind of, sort of affordable, or you could really go down the path and make it very affordable by the amount of underwriting you want to do on the land and the deed restrictions and such. So you're not pinning yourself in a corner on market rate versus affordable with this design concept.
It's just density.
So you still have all that latitude. It's just, as Commissioner Meyer points out, is that you're giving up about an acre and a half of buildable space in this concept. So,
but what you might build in that space may be inconsistent with your vision for this neighborhood as well, because it would push you into a different product type. And remember, we spent quite a bit of time devising this product type because you all pointed us in that direction. And so that's the reason that that layout is there. Back to Commissioner Garcia's point is, there's been some ground plowed there of putting that configuration together. And it is a challenging site from topography and geometry and lots of reasons. It's challenging the most challenging of all the elements of the subdivision was this, no big surprise, right?
That's why it's last.
Yeah.
So next steps.
I think if the board's not ready to reach consensus, then we probably need to provide some more information. But if you are comfortable giving direction to move forward with this configuration, then we could move forward.
it's just consensus on configuration, not anything else.
Given what Tony has just explained, I'm comfortable moving forward to the existing configuration, given that we still hold the opportunity for making policy and economic decisions to underwrite local worker housing in an ownership model. And I know that that's probably important from the community conversations I've been privy to. I don't know all of it, but that seems to be a really important part of getting local workers into ownership situations. And if we adopt one of my prior suggestions of preserving the option for multifamily, that's inevitably rentals. And that probably doesn't achieve the community public goals that I've heard voiced in some dialogues I've been privy to. So I think I'm okay with the optionality to give that up. And it really puts the onus on us to decide where is our mission and how do we want to accomplish that mission with what looks like pretty savvy urban planning and a lovely green space to enhance what might be a unique opportunity for our local workers. I'm comfortable moving forward.
And I guess just for me to, I wouldn't want the whole decision about all of a sudden Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is going to do, subsidized housing of some version or this or that to rest on this decision point or whatever. Because for me, that is a huge thing, and we have to really look at, okay, in the big picture, how do we really put that together, and what are going to be the methods that make sense, and what places, and is it only going to be in urban renewal areas or this or that. So I feel like that's a necessary but much bigger conversation that has to have a lot of elements to it.
I think this is just for density purposes at this
yep.
point.
And I mean, I think that's important to clarify just for expectations, is that it's just to allow ourselves the most density possible. It's not to solve
Right.
the bigger issue. It's just to give ourselves a flexibility. This corner has always been where we've challenged and been challenged, but I think the commitment still is product mix, product type in here that is as accessible as possible.
Correct. Any other questions? I think, do you have direction?
Yep, I just, thank you for the robust
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah.
It's great that it just.
We're always good for robust
Well,
discussion.
it's
Especially
really-
on monuments.
It's important to us that, that we didn't, like I said, we not get out in front of the board and that you all are driving the bus, so to speak. So it's really helpful for you guys to give the discussion on, so thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Tony, do you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Time for board commissioner comments. Any more? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.
I told my wife it'd be a quick meeting, I'll be home to
I-
mow the
Oh,
rest of
but
the
monuments
lawn.
were on the agenda.
know.
You're never gonna get out of here.
On my way to